Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us. So just to allow more people to join, we'll be starting the webinar in just 1 minute. So thank you for your patience. So good morning, everyone. My name's George, and welcome to the latest edition in our current Briefings webinar series, where today we will be talking about how digitisation can unlock a whole system net zero transition. To explore the topic in depth, I'm delighted to say that I am joined by Irena Di Martino, CEO of AmpX. And good morning to you, Irena, and thank you for taking the time to be here today. In just a moment, I will be handing over to Irena to kick off the presentation. But before that, I'd like to mention that we will have some time allocated at the end of the session for audience questions. So please do stick around until then, and we will make sure your questions are answered. And to ensure that we see these, please type them in the questions box in the bottom right-hand corner of your screens. So without further ado, I will now pass over to Irena.
Good morning, George, and good morning, everyone. It's great to be here. Thank you for hosting me, and very excited about this topic because indeed it really underpins the vision and the mission of AmpX. So I'm going to take you through a few slides to hopefully share thoughts that will trigger some good debate at the end of the presentation. So apologies. So I'm here to first of all, explain the context that really gave us the substrate for the thinking that underpins the AmpX value proposition. AmpX, just a reminder for those that may not know us and they've joined this morning, is a relatively young organization. It was established about 4 years ago as a fully owned subsidiary of AMP, which is our parent company. AMP is a renewable infrastructure developer and owner of assets around the world, and we have been now in existence for 4 years, and we have developed a portfolio of offerings that basically came from the acknowledgement that at the time of our birth, the energy transition was already well underway, and two trends specifically were driving a number of challenges that needed to be addressed and still need to be addressed in order to deliver the fully decarbonized grid of the future that we're all racing towards in order to meet the net zero ambitious targets. One of the trends is decentralization, and this trend is really driven by consumers at the very edge of the grid. These consumers have been uptaking a number of different technologies that are essentially low carbon technologies. If we think about the electrification of heat and transports, but we also think about rooftop solar generation and battery storage behind the meter, as well as even smart appliances that are basically becoming the essential constituents of an ecosystem in the residential space that the consumer wants to be able to navigate, whilst the stakeholders that are trying to address challenges in the grid are trying to instead manage in order to unlock flexibility that allows to compensate for the intermittency of renewables in a fully decarbonized system. So consumer energy resources are basically accelerating this massive, unprecedented change in the energy system that has gone from a grid which was designed for a unidirectional pipe flow to a grid which now has all these different many nodes at the edge that also result in bidirectional pipe flow. Associated with this trend, there is the digitalisation. Data sensors are by now everywhere, and visibility from these data sensors is something that we now have more and more increasingly so, even when we just utilize apps that are linked to specific devices, even in people's homes. But what what is absolutely essential is to make use of that data to provide useful outcomes to the different stakeholders that ultimately need to enable that the grid functions in order to cater for this level of decentralization. So we essentially established a vision, and from then on developed a digital energy platform that addressed the challenges of three main categories of stakeholders. One is the distribution network operators that are essentially those that own and operate the last mile of the grid that gets into people's homes, residential consumers like ourselves. Energy retailers, the entities that face consumers and that have to supply electricity to those consumers and have to basically keep enticing them with value propositions that are making sense for consumers and that allow the stickiness of those customers for energy retailers to keep commercially viable. And then last but not least is the energy consumers that were passive up to not long ago because they were mere recipient at the very edge of an electricity supply that was at the time in a centralized energy system going in a unidirectional power flow manner, but now are becoming more and more willing to not only have visibility of what happens in their homes, but be active participant into the energy system. And so when we think about what challenges we set out to address, which indeed explains the portfolio of offerings and the way we leverage digitalization in Ampex, distribution network operators today are faced with major challenges that are to do with the emergence of these consumer energy resources at the edge of the grid that result in the need for additional capacity of the networks. Additional capacity could be achieved in quite a linear fashion, but not necessarily the best way, which is through conventional network reinforcements, very expensive indeed, and there is pressure from the regulator all the way to even the very consumers to basically have cost-effective solutions, amongst which we can think of demand response as a typical non-wire alternative that needs to be adopted and possibly rolled out to scale for it to make sense. The network operators also need greater visibility. They need to understand what happens within their network as these distributed energy resources keep on increasing in presence and keep on challenging their network. They need to be able to also save on maintenance cost of their asset base. It's something that they haven't necessarily been able to do optimally to date, but it's something that they can and indeed should be doing moving forward. And very importantly, from a local grid constraints point of view, network operators need to be able to keep the voltage within the statutory limits that it has to be, despite the disturbing effect, the unsettling effect of distributed energy resources that tend to push that voltage outside of the allowable statutory limits. When we think about retailers, and in the UK, we have indeed witnessed, but it's not just a UK confined phenomenon. It's a phenomenon that has been seen in the US, in Australia. Retailers have been going through challenges. Some retailers have gone out of business. The increased cost of energy for consumers make it hard for retailers to keep up with the expectations of their consumers, the need of their consumers. So they need to be able to entice their consumers with viable value propositions that make sense for this increasingly complex ecosystem that is the residential consumer home. They need to have visibility of the habits of their customers so that they can also tailor tariffs accordingly. And they need to optimize energy usage in a way that actually enables them participation into additional revenue streams such as demand response contracts. When we think about the likes of ourselves on this webinar this morning, we, as I said before, are all taking on increasingly more clean energy technology solutions such as EVs, electric heat pumps are coming up, and we all need to have more visibility into what the consumption in our home is, as well as the generation, because some of us have rooftop solar generation. We want to make sure that we make the most of that. We need user-centric solutions because we don't want to really relinquish control when it comes to our own lifestyle preferences, and we don't want to really jeopardize those preferences that make up for the patterns of the way in which we consume electricity. And if we have the opportunity to lower further our energy bills by participating into demand response, we want to be able to do so without burdening ourselves with actions that need to be consistently repeated over time, and that people, like everyone on this call, very busy, don't necessarily are amenable to do so in a way that can allow the system to scale. So bearing all of that context in mind, so the challenges of decentralization, the need to leverage digitalization, these three main stakeholders, those challenges, we absolutely believe they need to be addressed simultaneously. We came up with a digital energy platform that today is very uniquely placed because it basically comprises of a portfolio of offerings that are here depicted on this slide that address the very challenges of these stakeholders with a whole system approach. So we decided to move away from a point solution, not to focus on a single vertical or a single stakeholder with a specific challenge, but we decided to think quite transversally. And in doing so, we developed an asset management platform that today caters in the US in commercial operation for generation assets that have got battery storage in it. And what the asset management platform of Ampex does is essentially allows these assets to be more profitable for the asset owner. And we essentially provide means to optimize the maintenance costs through the life of those assets. We then also manage the operations and the performance of smart transformers that we have developed with a proprietary design, first of their kind actually, and today live in UK Power Networks. And I'll tell you more in a moment about what these assets do for UK Power Networks and DNOs in general. And we also then developed, to address the challenges of retailers and consumers, a very user-centric and quite innovative energy management system for people's homes, which today is in operations in Australia across a number of retailers. So what does the asset management platform of Ampex does? It really is our backbone. It is the system architecture that has allowed us to ultimately develop this platform that caters for all the different nodes that I've just enunciated before. And it essentially is a tool to monitor the health of a number of different assets. So when you think about front-of-the-meter battery storage assets or behind-the-meter battery storage assets, or even the smart transformers, the asset management platform essentially keeps an eye on how they perform. It provides updates to asset owners around the performance of those assets, as well as how they behave and how they should behave in terms of dispatch in specific commercial constructs, so therefore meeting markets, price signals and markets constraints. And essentially, it becomes a tool for allowing the asset owner and the asset operator to have better visibility and be technology enabled in order to save cost and make the most also of a reliable asset, because in essentially monitoring the health of these assets, we maximize the uptime, we maximize the reliability of these assets, we minimize the downtime. The smart transformer is, as I said before, an absolute essential piece of the portfolio of offerings of Ampex, because it addresses the challenges the network operators have got in the low voltage network with the emergence of these consumer energy resources and therefore the increased pace of decentralization. So it is a replacement for conventional transformers. It has an electromagnetic part to it, but it is also equipped with the power electronics and an onboard processor, which allow us to dynamically change the voltage so that it always stays within the statutory limits. We also have a number of data sensors in this device, data that allow us to do two things. One is monitor the performance of the asset and keep an eye on its health. Therefore, we're able to prescribe condition-based maintenance regime for network operators that allow them to save cost through the life of these assets, as well as detect proactively any faults that may occur that can lead to downtime. So we maximize uptime by identifying any anomaly that needs to be flagged to the network operator around their asset base. Bear in mind that up to now, the asset base of DNOs not only in the UK, but generally worldwide, has been managed pretty much reactively, because there is a maintenance regime which is quite conservative and is based on a prescriptive set of intervals of time when these assets are inspected. What we enable is to essentially change that into quite an active life management regime that is much more cost effective. The data centers also allow us to have cloud connected data that allow us to see what happens on grid and allow us to provide insights into the grid dynamics behavior to the network operators that then can utilize those to make decisions, for instance, about network planning. And on top of that, we're able, thanks to the asset life management that we perform on the smart transformer, we're able to make it operate outside its rated power for a certain period of time in order to flex the capacity of that asset. What that translates into is potential savings when it comes to otherwise having to increase the capacity of the network through reinforcements that in this case would become unnecessary. This is just an image to show you that the smart transformer is actually a real asset. We've gone through validation, extensive testing, and we now have it in operation in one of the substations of UK Power Networks and other substations coming online very soon. This is really, a system that is today essentially not a prototype, but serving a number of homes in UK Power Networks is about 200 homes. So we have a system that is delivering a number of strategic benefits to network operators, which are the ones that I've covered just now. When it comes to what we've done to address the challenges of retailers and consumers that they have in their perimeters as customers, because our customer is actually the retailer, we're a B2B business, but the end user has in their hands what you see depicted on the screen with a snapshot of the UI of our ALICE system. ALICE is the energy management system behind the meter, and we chose a name that is actually an acronym. It stands for Agent for Lifestyle Intelligent Control of Energy. And ALICE essentially is a technology stack that comprises of a gamified user interface for the consumer, something that gives the consumer an easy way to have visibility into their ecosystem, visibility into the different nodes that make up the home, whether it's whether it comprises of electric vehicles, heat pumps, rooftop solar generation, resi batteries. We basically give the user, the residential consumer, a tool to look at how the energy consumption goes, what the tariff that is tailored for that user is, and we then utilize data analytics that we process through our algorithms to provide insights both to the retailers, but importantly to optimally schedule the usage of this many different energy devices in people's homes to ultimately allow energy bill savings and lowering carbon footprint. So there are tangible benefits that we deliver to the consumers, and therefore we also allow the retailers to keep competitive, to have value propositions that make sense and are commercially viable for their users. Very importantly, what this energy management system does, which is really at the heart of the value offering, is it provides a lifestyle tool, which is a single interface for residential consumers to navigate otherwise the segmentation of many different apps which are linked to the different energy devices in their homes. So it's essentially a single view and an easy view into the home ecosystem for residential consumers. We have deployed originally the energy management system of ALICE in the Living Lab, thanks to the Energy Systems Catapult, a year and a half ago in the UK across 50 independent homes. And it was really a successful deployment because it allowed us to integrate with even smarter appliances in people's homes. We were able to demonstrate the ability to adhere to dynamic tariffs. In those homes, there was octopus tariffs that were half-hourly changing, agile tariffs. And we were also able, very importantly, to demonstrate that within a couple of weeks, users were trusting Alice to make the right choices to keep their energy bills low, to adhere to their personal preferences. The patterns of behavior were very much at the center of our optimal scheduling, so that people felt that their lifestyle comfort was not put in jeopardy by just adhering to tariffs. And we were able to have participation into simulated demand response at very short intervals of time, as short as 20 minutes. So we had an overwhelming positive feedback at the end of the deployment. People actually wanted to retain Alice despite the end of financial incentives for them to do so. And this really just confirmed that what we need to enable retailers and residential consumers to allow us to unlock flexibility from behind the meter is give them a tool that is very much user-centric, that is centered around consumer behavioral analytics and not just focused on the integration from a technology perspective of a number of different smart energy devices. So we had, for retailers, increased customer satisfaction. We have retailers that recognize the value of our advanced analytics. We promote the ability to roll out energy bundles. Energy as a service ultimately is what this sort of offering enables. And we provide a tool for retailers to tailor tariffs that are specific for a certain cohort. And very importantly, which is what's happening in Australia with our deployment today across 2 of the top retailers, we enable participation into fully automated demand response. So we move away from just behavioral demand response. And the important thing is that they provide tangible benefits to consumers because they've got that single interface that eases their journey into their ever complex home ecosystem with all the uptake of the many different low carbon technology devices. We've got a way to really provide visibility that is what we know they need, and we've got the ability for them to participate into demand response without burdening them unduly. So really, everything that I've shown you just now, and I've given you hopefully an overview of what we offer and how these solutions address challenges, really hinges on us leveraging the digitalization that we have been witnessing the energy system to undergo in a way that provides useful outcomes for these stakeholders that our solutions actually are have been developed for. So when we think about the smart transformer, we basically have a number of data analytics that provide a pair of eyes into the behavior of the grid, a pair of eyes into the behavior of the assets itself, and therefore provide a number of strategic benefits to network operators that need to future-proof their grid. So not only do they alleviate constraints that they have today with what the network is today, but they also look at what are the needs of the future network in a fully decarbonized grid. When we look at Alice, that I've just shown you some snapshots of, the data analytics is really what provides the upsides to both retailers and consumers. And when we are able to deliver through that data analytics a very user-centric solution that lower energy bills, that enables a scalable demand response, fully automated, that enables tailored tariffs, then it's clearly understood how powerful utilizing data in the right way becomes for stakeholders that we address. And ultimately, we rely on the data that we collect from all these different many sources that our asset management platform caters for, in order to have a very unique, diverse set of data sources that we then train our algorithms and are able to provide the right way to optimize not only the performance of those assets, but the dispatch of those assets in order to earn revenue to the asset owner and the asset operator. So digitalization is absolutely something that we need to be able to leverage for useful outcomes, not just to provide visibility per se, but to provide insights that then decision makers can leverage in order to move forward and be commercially viable, deliver the net zero targets, and always cater for the preferences of the end user, which is something we absolutely advocate. The whole system approach that we really rely on is, to me, what differentiates us from a number of other digital energy players, because at the end of the day, we have a portfolio of offerings that really look at addressing simultaneously the challenges that I'm a strong believer need to be looked at in their entirety in order to get to the net zero targets that we all aspire to deliver the grid of the future. I think this concludes my overview of how Ampex really has taken the whole system approach and leveraged digitalization to date. And hopefully I have triggered a number of questions amongst the audience, but I'll leave it to George to drive from this point on. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Irene. That was a really interesting presentation. So as you mentioned, we'll be now moving into the Q&A section. So please do make sure you get your questions in. I can see we've already got quite a few. So we'll kick off with Bruno Andres at the top there. So Bruno asks, how do you consider in your AmpX platform the various additional actors like independent power supplier, local utilities?
We deal, as I said before, we're a business to business. We have a business to business model for us to deploy solutions. So anyone that is an entity that interfaces with end users that are the residential consumers for us is a viable customer. The retailers have been for us identified as the go-to-market at the stage. And the reason why we're in Australia is because there's the highest penetration to date of rooftop solar generation. They've got massive challenges on grid with minimum operational demand, not just shaving peak demand, but actually having system that utilizes the supply in times of negative energy pricing. So energy management system there is a necessity, is a more imminent need that it could be acknowledged to be in other markets. But we do absolutely encompass amongst our customers other entities, and we hope to be able to work even transversely with adjacent entities such as local authorities and anyone that can ultimately allow us to deploy a way to automate the demand response and unlock flexibility from residential consumer space, which today is still pretty much untapped.
Brilliant. So Andy Green asks, do you offer a white label solution?
Yeah, absolutely. So what you've seen is the Alice as we developed it, but in Australia, our customers are starting by deploying it as is, but we absolutely are able to provide white label solution. We're completely sensitive to the need for branding to stay what the retailer or the customer wants it to be.
Brilliant. And Richard Helen asked an interesting question. So how do you see the rapid development of artificial intelligence impacting your value proposition?
Well, we absolutely rely on artificial intelligence cutting edge tools. So for us, it's, and hopefully I've given a sense through the how we leverage the different data sources to provide useful outcomes. For us, a significant part of our workforce is actually data scientists, machine learning engineers. All our solutions are absolutely reliant on data analytics, on sourcing data from a number of different nodes and making sense through the appropriate analytics to provide outcomes. So for us, the evolving space of artificial intelligence is what makes for the DNA of Ampex.
Fantastic, thank you. Now, Lena asked the question of what has the feedback been from the US market on the asset management platform?
Love this question because it's actually very timely for who asked it. We have had inquiries from a couple of big utilities in the US, and we're very excited to actually be engaging with the US as we speak. And we see ourselves entering the US market in the next 12 to 18 months. It's definitely a prolific space. It's a space that has seen some of the biggest example of hardship with the pass-through to consumers when the Texas incidents occurred a year or so ago. So it's a space where utilities are absolutely aware that they need an energy management system. I think they've seen mostly examples of visibility tools in homes ecosystem rather than consumer management systems, which is what we advocate. So we believe that we have the right value prop for the US space. And I think that the deployment in Australia will absolutely provide the confidence that other markets need in order to adopt our offering.
Brilliant, thank you. Now, Bruno asked, how do you consider the global virtualization of the grid elements and how will that impact your architecture?
Well, again, we're fortunate, or maybe I should say we're very well placed to And we're grid aware, topology grid aware, thanks to our insights from Smart Transformer, as well as market aware, thanks to the fact that we go our own price forecasting. That at the end of the day, we're also the dispatching assets into market. So for us, the understanding of the grid behavior and the fact that we model systems according to grid dynamics and superimpose the market element to it gives us the ability to deploy the appropriate solution for the appropriate stakeholder in the appropriate segment of the grid. So hopefully that, if I've interpreted correctly, the question answers that question.
Brilliant. So Alto Kemeny, he asked an interesting question. So in many countries, the actual customers or users of the E2E solution would include, at least in the EU, more than DSOs, suppliers and consumers, and balance responsible parties, TSOs, etc. So how do you think to make the using a sole E2E solution?
I think that what we're doing in the UK with the reform of the retailer space and the attempt to make demand response something that moves away from just a wholesale market view and a behavioral demand response type, which is what the system operator at the moment is focusing on, is in a way applicable to the thinking that is being done outside of the UK. I think it comes down to having a regulatory process that enables a whole system thinking next to the markets understanding of the different constraints, and really moving away from a supply dominated thinking, moving away from willing to just deploy solutions which are not scalable in terms of time, because at the moment a behavioral demand response type solution only addresses the need a specific time for a very short period of time with a financial incentive that at the end of the day remains quite confined and limited in the impact that he can have. So I think we need the REMA type process applicable to the retailer space, moving away from a very supply dominated thinking that so far we have witnessed, and we're big advocates of that. We've been working with a number of parties here in the UK, and we believe that that is reflected also in the thinking outside of the UK.
Great, thank you. Now, Kevin asks, how does Alice get data from the energy assets, so EV chargers and solar PV, and measure the electrical consumption of a household?
So we go houses where there is smart meters, but we rely on API connectivity to the different devices that we ultimately monitor and control. So we have an API connectivity through either direct API integrations or middleware platforms that we leverage in order to broaden as much as possible the portfolio of devices that we're able to control.
Brilliant, thank you. Now, David asks, so does the Smart Transformer analyze data from nodes across the LV network, for example, at consumers' meter positions?
Well, we have each Smart Transformers gives us an understanding of what happens down the feeder, so for the cohort of homes that it caters for. But we have actually with UKPN currently, with the unit that we have in operations, we have launched some sort of an experiment, which has actually been enthusiastically welcomed by the consumers in the homes that the substation serves. So we have deployed a number of smart plugs in people's homes, and those give us the ability to understand the impact that we have at voltage level that also underpins the savings that we enable through the Smart Transformer technology across the network, or indeed in the network that the Smart Transformer caters for. So we get insights into the consumption of the homes that are within that network. And we also combine those insights with what we learn from the Alice energy management system. It doesn't matter if it's in the homes where the Smart Transformer is present or elsewhere. We have been leveraging and we'll continue to leverage the energy management system behind the meter to learn about digital signatures of specific devices, and therefore we're then able to also operate in terms of disaggregation of loads and learn what make up the specific type of assets that are down a sub feeder that the Smart Transformers actually caters for.
Got you. And Alto asks, is your solution based on a centralized cloud architecture?
Yeah, we've got a cloud-hosted data engine, and we do absolutely utilize data analytics, which are hosted in our central cloud. However, we also dispatch, for instance, in the case of Smart Transformer, we dispatch then learnings and machine learning algorithms that are developed in the cloud century, but that then become implemented locally at Smart Transformer level.
Brilliant, thank you. Now, there's just one question that I'd like to ask as well, if I can just jump in, because we last hosted a webinar with you, obviously, in April, where we talked about the flexibility opportunities that artificial intelligence can unlock. And now that we approach the end of the year, I'm just curious about the progress you've made in scaling your technology, and where are you in terms of your commercial expansion?
Yeah, actually, this is a good question, because the end of financial year is coinciding for us with the solidification of a number of opportunities that are allowing us to go live in Australia. Very excited actually about it, with two of the top retailers in Australia, where Alice, the energy management system for residential consumers, is going to be deployed. So we have got presence and actually very meaningful presence in Australia, because this has happened through engagements one-on-one or through tendering process. So there's been an acknowledgement from these retailers that what we provide is differentiated, despite where a young organization and these retailers had, before engaging with us, engaged with established incumbents. So very excited by the entry in the Australian market, which, as I said before, has got a resonance across other markets. California is one of them, but I think the UK is definitely going to look with interest at what we're able to demonstrate that we provide in terms of benefits to the Australian consumers. Australia also leads the way with the uptake of consumer energy resources, and actually EVs that were lagging behind in terms of numbers with respect to the UK. The adoption rate is now becoming much more significant. So very soon, an Australian home will comprise of all the different big five loads that we are aiming to control in order to enable fully automated demand response. On the smart transformer side, we continue to be very proud to be working with UK Power Networks. It has been the first adopter of the technology, but there is interest from other DNOs. Obviously, it comes with the prowess of an adopter as credible as UKPN. So we look forward to engaging with other DNOs in the future and growing the smart transformer footprint.
Lovely, exciting times then. And
Yeah.
I think we've just got time for one more question. So Kate Thompson asks, would you be available to demonstrate Alice to an individual?
To an individual, yeah, I'm sure that my product team can't wait to demonstrate Alice to anyone enthusiastic about it. So yeah, I'm sure we can connect and see what the best way forward for that is.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much. And I think that's all that we have time for. So thank you again, Irena, for a really interesting presentation and a great Q&A section. And obviously, thank you to everyone that has joined us today and contributed to this webinar. I hope everyone has a lovely Thursday, and keep an eye on Current for the next Briefings webinar. Thank you again.
Thank you, George. Bye.
Bye.